Before we even talk about shade, let's be very clear about one thing. This wasn't shade. This was exposure. The kind of exposure that doesn't whisper, it detonates. The kind that makes phones vibrate in Montecito, makes PR teams sweat, and makes carefully built narratives start cracking in real time. Because when Piers Morgan speaks, he doesn't poke. He unloads. This wasn't shade. This was exposure. Piers Morgan voiced what executives, royal insiders, and gossip circles have been muttering for years. And that right there, that was the match to the gasoline. Because this wasn't new gossip. This was old frustration finally getting a microphone. Years of eye rolling behind closed doors, years of polite silence, years of executives smiling in meetings and laughing later, all of it poured out in one ruthless moment. And the entertainment world felt it instantly. The entertainment world is still reeling after Piers Morgan dropped what insiders are calling the most devastating takedown of Meghan Markle's career ambitions in recent memory. Morgan didn't just throw shade at the Duchess of Sussex. He obliterated her entire public persona in front of the world. Sources close to Meghan report that she was pacing her sprawling Montecito mansion like a caged lioness, her jaw tight and her temper simmering as the reality of public humiliation set in. Picture it: Montecito, million-dollar walls, ocean air, and inside that mansion, pure rage, pacing, phone calls. A woman who once believed she could bend Hollywood and monarchy at the same time suddenly realizing the crowd wasn't clapping anymore. They were watching closely, and Piers wasn't done, not even close, because he went straight for the crown jewel of the Meghan narrative, Oprah. Piers Morgan didn't just stop at mocking Meghan's Netflix ambitions. He resurrected her most infamous claims from the Oprah interview and tore them to shreds. Sources confirmed that his segment on the alleged secret garden wedding performed by the Archbishop of Canterbury sent shockwaves through both Hollywood and royal circles. This was the moment the room changed, because that interview wasn't just an interview, it was her magnum opus. The tears, the pauses, the truth. And suddenly, someone stood up and said, wait, that doesn't add up. According to Morgan, such a ceremony would have been illegal, an absolute fabrication. And he didn't hold back in highlighting the absurdity. Yeah, old Princess Pinocchio was off on a good one here, he declared, using a nickname that palace insiders now reportedly whisper in private corridors, barely stifling laughter. The audience in the studio reportedly gasped as if collectively realizing they were witnessing the public dismantling of a royal narrative. Princess Pinocchio. Not a joke anymore. A label. A symbol. And labels stick when people were already thinking it, they just hadn't said it out loud yet. Then came the surgical strike. Morgan meticulously questioned the credibility of Meghan's entire Oprah story, framing it as a deliberate attempt to manipulate public perception. He dissected claims about mental health struggles, racism allegations, and supposed financial cut-offs, arguing that these revelations were less confessions and more calculated attacks on the monarchy. This wasn't emotional commentary. This was an accusation of strategy, of orchestration, of narrative warfare. And behind the scenes, sources close to Meghan claim she reportedly called multiple aides in a frenzy after the broadcast, demanding damage control strategies and explanations for how such a devastating segment could have aired. Phones lighting up, advisors scrambling, PR teams whispering, how did this get out? Because once credibility is questioned, everything shakes. Hollywood noticed, studios noticed, and suddenly that Netflix comeback didn't feel like a comeback anymore. Industry insiders suggest that this public challenge to her credibility could have ripple effects on her Hollywood ambitions, potentially making studios hesitant to associate with someone now widely perceived as deceptive or manipulative. That's the kiss of death in entertainment, not scandal, unpredictability. And then came the brutal irony. Royal commentators are calling this a pivotal moment. A woman who once believed she could dominate Hollywood and the monarchy simultaneously now faces a reality check delivered by one of Britain's most influential media personalities. Reality checks hurt more when you didn't see them coming. And just when Meghan tried to pivot back into Hollywood with glossy smiles and carefully chosen friends, the industry shrugged. Hollywood insiders reportedly delivered a collective shrug. Sources describe executives quietly labeling the project a vanity venture, with skepticism running rampant about Meghan's talent and professionalism. Vanity. That word echoed. Because in Hollywood, vanity projects don't scare people. Entitlement does. And it only got worse. The perception that Meghan believes she is smarter than everyone in the room, combined with Harry's reported immaturity, has reportedly made studios wary of even minor involvement with the Sussex brand. Wary. That's polite Hollywood language for stay away. In entertainment circles, the couple is being whispered about as toxic or high risk, signaling that professional doors may be quietly closing. Quietly. No announcements, just silence. And silence is louder than rejection. Even public appearances became landmines. Dodger Stadium, luxury suite. Cameras everywhere. And suddenly, sources describe Meghan bouncing around the luxury suite like a performer auditioning for attention, while Harry allegedly sat frozen, visibly disengaged, and completely disconnected from the event. Two people, one desperate to perform, one completely checked out. Body language experts reportedly analyzed the footage and concluded that Meghan's behavior was over the top, calculated, and desperately performative. That word again, performative. And the internet didn't miss it. Mockery, memes, commentary, the kind that spreads faster than apologies, because when the mask slips once, people rewind everything. And insiders say this wasn't isolated. From Hollywood parties to elite gatherings, the same complaints echoed. Control, chaos, desperation. Even Kris Jenner's birthday reportedly became a PR nightmare. And then Jane Goodall. The absence that spoke louder than any tribute. Social media erupted with criticism, framing the absence as emblematic of the couple's tendency to prioritize optics over authenticity. Optics over authenticity. That's the accusation that keeps returning like a ghost. And behind closed doors, Montecito wasn't calm. It was a pressure cooker. Sources report Meghan pacing her Montecito mansion, reportedly furious and frustrated after Piers Morgan's scathing commentary went viral. The walls didn't protect her from the noise anymore. And Harry? Harry is said to be struggling to manage both public criticism and private tensions. Two ambitions, one narrative, and a world that's no longer buying it. This wasn't just one interview. This was the accumulation. Years of curated storytelling colliding with scrutiny. And when the archives were opened, dates blurred, stories shifted, timelines cracked. Not accusations, questions. And unanswered questions are the most dangerous thing in public life, because silence doesn't kill curiosity. It feeds it. And right now, the world isn't looking away. Because here's the thing no glossy interview ever admits. Once doubt creeps in, it never leaves quietly. It settles. It waits, and then it multiplies. The narrative that once protected Meghan Markle like armor suddenly began to feel thin, almost brittle. Every past clip, every emotional pause, every carefully framed silence from the Oprah moment was now being replayed not with sympathy, but with suspicion. Viewers weren't asking how she felt anymore. They were asking why the details kept changing. And that shift is brutal, because public opinion doesn't flip all at once. It tilts, slowly, quietly, until one day you realize the ground beneath you isn't where you left it. Online sentiment began to harden. Once loyal supporters didn't disappear, they hesitated, they questioned, they joked. And joking is dangerous, because mockery means emotional detachment. The moment the audience laughs instead of cries, the spell is broken. Princess Pinocchio stopped sounding like an insult and started sounding like shorthand. Hollywood noticed that too. Behind studio doors, the whispers weren't cruel. They were cautious. Executives didn't rage. They recalculated. They asked whether attaching themselves to the Sussexes brand was worth the unpredictable backlash, the exhausting PR management, the constant need to explain someone else's story instead of promoting their own work. And then there was Harry. Because if Meghan's problem was control, Prince Harry was being quietly labeled something worse in industry circles: unserious. The stories circulated with uncomfortable consistency, meetings interrupted by odd demands, a lack of preparation, a visible disconnect between the gravity of million-dollar negotiations and his casual, almost adolescent demeanor. In Hollywood, reputation isn't destroyed by scandal alone, it's destroyed by inconvenience. And insiders were starting to feel inconvenienced. The Netflix situation, once framed as a revolutionary partnership, now felt like a liability on paper, not because of content, but because of chaos. Too many voices, too much control, too little flexibility. Creative teams reportedly felt boxed in, their expertise overwritten by a couple more concerned with optics than storytelling. And optics were already failing. Every public appearance now carried risk. A smile could be read as smug, silence as manipulation, enthusiasm as desperation, detachment as marital trouble. There was no neutral anymore. The Dodgers incident wasn't just embarrassing, it was symbolic. A couple physically together but emotionally miles apart. One performing for the camera, the other visibly retreating inward. Analysts didn't even need to speculate. The footage spoke for itself. And once that image lodged itself into the public mind, it spread backward. People began reinterpreting everything that came before it through that lens. Then came the social missteps. Elite Hollywood events that should have been networking gold reportedly turned cold. Invitations slowed, interactions shortened, and when whispers emerged about Kris Jenner's birthday chaos, it reinforced a growing narrative that Meghan didn't blend, she disrupted. Hollywood tolerates ego. It does not tolerate disruption without payoff. The Jane Goodall absence was the final crack for many observers. Public grief without physical presence felt hollow, performative, another carefully worded statement standing in for action. And in contrast, seeing other global figures show up in person only magnified the absence. People don't demand perfection from public figures. They demand consistency, and consistency was unraveling. Behind closed doors, Montecito reportedly no longer felt like a sanctuary. Sources describe it as tense, restless, emotionally volatile, phones ringing, advisors rotating, strategy meetings bleeding into late nights. A home that once symbolized freedom now functioning like a war room. And the pressure wasn't just external. Insiders hint that the strain between Harry and Meghan has become harder to hide. Different instincts, different priorities, one craving narrative control, the other increasingly resentful of the spotlight they can't escape. And when couples disagree privately but present a united front publicly, the cracks still show. The audience always senses it. Meanwhile, Piers Morgan's shadow loomed large because his commentary didn't fade. It echoed. Other commentators picked it up. Other platforms amplified it. And suddenly, his critique wasn't just one man's opinion, it was permission. Permission to question. Permission to doubt. Permission to say out loud what had once been whispered. And once that permission exists, it can't be revoked. Archival digging followed. Old interviews resurfaced, biographies were cross-checked, graduation dates, early career claims. None of it explosive on its own, but together it created a fog of uncertainty. Not proof of wrongdoing, proof of inconsistency. And inconsistency is lethal to credibility. Silence became the chosen response. No clarifications, no corrections, no recalibration. Just carefully curated appearances and social posts that felt increasingly disconnected from the criticism surrounding them. But silence in this context didn't read as dignity. It read as avoidance. The irony is cruel. Meghan once positioned herself as a truth teller, a disruptor of royal silence, a woman brave enough to speak uncomfortable truths. Now, faced with uncomfortable questions of her own, she chose the very silence she once condemned. Public opinion clocked that instantly. What remains now is not a downfall, it's a crossroads. Hollywood hasn't slammed the door. It's left it ajar, watching carefully to see if the chaos continues or if genuine recalibration is possible. The public hasn't turned away entirely. Fascination remains, but fascination without trust curdles into ridicule. The Sussex brand, once sold as revolutionary, now feels overexposed. Every move scrutinized, every statement dissected, every smile questioned. The myth of effortless reinvention has collapsed under the weight of repetition. And perhaps the most damaging realization of all is this: the story no longer belongs to them. It belongs to commentators, to analysts, to audiences who feel they were emotionally invested and now emotionally misled. Once that shift happens, control is gone forever. Whether this moment becomes a temporary stumble or a permanent unraveling depends on what comes next. Retreat, reinvention, or continued defiance. But one thing is undeniable: the spell is broken. The audience is no longer watching with wonder. They're watching with receipts. And the world, once enchanted by the promise of a modern fairy tale, now leans forward not to applaud, but to see how the ending really unfolds. Ending really unfolds. Ending really unfolds. Ending really unfolds.